Hi, I'm Mark Lynn, and I'm the roommate coach. You're listening to KZZH 96.7 FM in Eureka, California. This will be episode 11 of the Roommate Coach. It's going to be Good Habits for Being a Great Roommate, Part 2. KZZH has been brought to the air here in Eureka, California by Access Humboldt. You can reach Access Humboldt at accesshumboldt.net. You can leave feedback for the Roommate Coach, that's me, at theroommatecoach.com. You can use the contact link on the homepage, or you can call 24-hour voicemail line at area 707-362-8000. That's 707-362-8000. If you happen to be commenting about a prior show that you heard here on KZZH, please include either the name or the episode number. For example, the one upcoming today is episode 11. And if you leave that, then I'll have an idea of which show you're referring to, and it will help me understand your comment. So thank you for any feedback you want to provide. Feedback really helps. The motto here at the Roommate Coach is World Peace, one roommate at a time. Many of us are concerned about just that, about peace in our world. The somewhat contentious election we just went through is probably proof of that. Unfortunately, very few of us can do much about world peace, at least not in the sense of the overall world. This is why I really like being the roommate coach, because if I am successful in helping individuals to improve their relationships with their roommates, then in a sense I will be contributing to world peace, because much of the time you spend is in your own world with your roommates. So helping that situation improve is helping world peace. So at first glance, or at first listen, you might say, the motto sounds a little unrealistic until you redefine world, or add an additional definition to world. So anyway, enough of that. Let's get on here with episode 11. I'm going to be talking about good habits for being a really great roommate. This is part 2. Well, first of all, just a quick recap of part 1. I talked about 2 habits in particular that I think are important for being a good roommate, being a great roommate. The first one I spoke of was the importance of letting go of blame. Blaming and guilt, and talking about people being at fault and making a big deal out of mistakes, our own or someone else's for that matter. I think it's a real good idea to find alternatives for that, mainly because it reduces defensiveness and it emphasizes solutions. It emphasizes making things better rather than just pointing the finger. And the other one I spoke of last week was kind of the sort of a mirror image of the blame. And I talked about the importance of acknowledging your own mistakes. The relationship I see between the two concepts, between letting go of blaming and being comfortable with talking about mistakes, is that by getting away from blaming, you're encouraging a more positive environment. And hopefully, if that environment catches on, if you manage to spread that environment, you create an environment that is more accepting of people as we are. And the way we are is we're not perfect and we do make mistakes. And just simply accepting that without making a big deal out of it is, in my opinion, a much more healthy environment for peaceful interaction and getting along with each other. Now, to pick up where I left off, there's a really interesting aspect of this week in which I get to basically practice what I preach I want to continue talking about a kind of a variation on the admitting your own mistakes issue, and I'd call this accepting and accepting constructive criticism. And the reason this is personal for me is I received some very useful, it was constructive, but this is my point, it was also very useful criticism about my show from a friend who listened to it. He said he liked what I was doing and he liked my enthusiasm, but the one thing that he did find a little, off-putting, you would say, is it seems like I speak in a monotone when I'm doing the show. Now, I don't believe I do that the rest of the time, but for whatever reason, maybe it's because it's a new thing for me, maybe I'm nervous about doing as good a job as possible. I don't really know yet. I hope to figure it out and change it. But the larger point is I had an opportunity there to react more than one different way. I could have just simply gotten defensive, gotten mad at him, pretty much ignored what he said, and maybe countered with, "Oh, no, it's fine. That's just the way I talk." Now, had I responded that way, I believe I would have missed a very good opportunity and a very important bit of information, because I do want this show to be as well received as possible. I want it to be as enjoyable as possible for the listener. And I do believe that I've got some valuable information, some information that I know I found extremely useful in my life, and I still do. And it would be a shame if something as relatively insignificant, I think the most important thing is the message itself, but we all know the book by the cover and all that type thing. If you don't get past the cover, you'll never know what was in the book. And if my delivery is substandard enough that people don't like the way it sounds, and there's plenty of other things to do with your time than listen to the Roommate Coach, then they'll never know what I have to say. So I really appreciate the constructive criticism, and I intend to do what I can. In fact, I've already begun. I'm hoping that it's already a little different. I guess what I'm trying to do is just relax a little bit and allow myself to be a little more animated. Another thing I plan to do in the very near future, I imagine the holidays will interfere a little bit, but as soon as I can, I plan to join Toastmasters. That's something I've been thinking about doing for a long time now, but just haven't gotten around to. But I think that will maybe give me an opportunity to learn how to basically spruce up my delivery somewhat. So there is the Roommate Coach practicing what he preaches. And like I say, acknowledge mistakes and look to constructive criticism. And it has to be constructive. It's not the same as someone insulting or tearing you down or just saying something mean for the sake of being mean. And I think we all kind of know the difference. But this was definitely not mean-spirited at all. It was genuine information. So that's my message, is if you're fortunate enough to have access to some valuable information about yourself, and it's meant in a positive manner, it's meant to be helpful, then I suggest that you listen. And like I said last time talking about admitting mistakes, acknowledging something that isn't exactly the way you would like it to be is not the same as somehow agreeing that it will be that way forever. It's the exact opposite. The first step to changing something is acknowledging it. You're listening to The Roommate Coach. My name is Mark Lynn. This is KZZH 96.7 FM in Eureka, California. This is episode 11 of The Roommate Coach, in which I'm talking about really good habits for being a really great roommate, and this is part 2. The motto here at The Roommate Coach is world peace, one roommate at a time. The bumper music is called Rollin' at 5, and that's by Kevin MacLeod. And you can leave feedback for me at theroommatecoach.com. You can use the contact link on the homepage. You can also call area 707-362-8000. 707-362-8000. It's a 24-hour voicemail system. KZZH has been brought to the air by Access Humboldt. You can reach them at accesshumboldt.net. Okay, I'm going to continue on my listing of good habits for being a great roommate. The next one has to do with twin aspects or twin issues, I guess you could say, of privacy and company. I'll lead off with another quote from Robert Heinlein. He says, "Privacy and company are essential, and you can drive someone crazy by depriving them of either." So it's all about striking a balance in a living situation. We all need company. They say in prisons that the solitary confinement is considered the cruelest punishment of all. And yet at the same time, we all need time and space to just have our own thoughts and collect our thoughts and just kind of get things together. So striking that balance between roommates, among roommates, can be really complex. There is a larger issue, maybe a broader way to say what I'm saying here, which is that your roommates are not there to meet all of your needs. And this is aggravated somewhat by something else I remember from my days studying with psychotherapist Nathaniel Brandon. He said that many people are starved for someone who will really listen to them. So for whatever reason, it's quite possible that one or more of your roommates, or you for that matter, might have a real strong desire or need to really talk to people about whatever is going on with you. That's all well and good, and that can be a really important part of any relationship, certainly a roommate relationship. But at the same time, it has to be balanced out with the other roommates' need and desire for privacy and solitude. Once again, communication, clear and concise and honest communication, can be extremely helpful. We are pretty much encouraged in our society to be nice and to not be confrontational and to pretty much go along with what others want, whether we want to or not. So there will frequently be a temptation to just sort of sit there and let your roommate go on and on about his or her weekend or whatever it may be, even beyond the point where you're comfortable with it. And of course, this is a pretty standard scenario. I think we've all been on one side or the other of this. I know I have, on both sides, I must admit. If the person who is feeling somewhat victimized by the whole thing doesn't speak up and just allows it to continue, and this goes on an ongoing basis, at some point it obviously breeds resentment. So that's not good. So there's probably a couple of things that could be done. One would be to establish this as a policy, and by this I mean the concept that, sure, we will listen to each other, but at the same time we all will reserve the right to let each other know how much we want to listen, just how much time we want to spend. And if everyone involved can agree in advance, the trick, I think, is to get this kind of an agreement ahead of the actual situation. If everyone will agree that, okay, I'll talk and tell you what's going on, and you let me know when you've heard enough, and then we'll go on to something else. Now, once again, in the interest of self-disclosure, I will confess, in my early days, I remember back in my school days, as a matter of fact, I had a roommate, and at the time, I was very, very chatty, especially first thing in the morning. For whatever reason, I tend to wake up just instantly on, and sometimes people around me do not. And until I learned better, until I developed some consideration and some courtesy, there was a time, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it, when I would wake up and just start talking a mile a minute to my poor roommate who, unlike me, needed a little while to kind of get things going. And I found out sometime later that this was really annoying, and I realize now that I would have been a better roommate if I had been more sensitive and more considerate and less chatty first thing in the morning. So what's done is done, but I can certainly do better now and pass the experience on to anyone else who may be facing the same kind of situation. So that is this segment, Privacy and Company, striking a really good balance. Actually, I will end with another quote. There was a book called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and I clearly remember one I think my mom mentioned to me many, many years ago in talking about how to have good relationships. And the quote from Gibran was, "Let there be spaces in your togetherness." And that always stuck with me. I really like that. Let there be spaces in your togetherness. I think that sums it up very nicely. Okay, a brief interlude here. I want to mention something that I'll repeat from time to time since I realize it's not real likely that someone will necessarily hear every episode, at least until I get a regular scheduled time slot for the roommate coach. A really obvious question that someone could ask would be, why is this such a big deal? I mean, roommates have had problems with each other since probably for as long as there have been roommates, and the vast majority of the time, they're really not objectively that big a deal. They usually get resolved one way or another, or people just learn to live with a little bit of annoyance, and some would go on to say that that's probably pretty good practice for the rest of life, which is actually part of my point. The first reason I think the problems are more important than a lot of people might realize is that I think roommates are more important, or at least they can be, and I would go on to say they should be. I'll probably devote an entire show to this at some point, so for now I'll just keep it quick. But connections, just real serious, genuine human connections, are not that easy to find and establish and keep, especially as we get on in life and get out and have jobs and everyone's busy and everything. It's really pretty hard. So living with someone is an ideal time to form the kind of connection that sometimes can last a lifetime, can lead to very good friendships, can be important business connections, can lead to all kinds of good things in one's life. So that's my first reason. The second reason, which I alluded to briefly a little while ago, kind of parallels what I think it's the law enforcement people refer to as the broken window theory, which states that if you allow one broken window in a neighborhood, then after a while there will be more, and then the paint will come off and the building will get run down, and after a while you'll have a slum. The whole neighborhood goes to hell in a handbag. So the parallel I'm drawing here is that, yeah, a roommate not doing the dishes or maybe being late with the rent, maybe in one way of looking at it, that's not a big deal. But if you let that happen, and if you don't learn how to stick up with yourself and how to basically get treated right, and the other side of that is how to treat others right, these are just crucially important life skills that if you don't learn them and don't perfect them or get really good at that, there are other things in life that will probably be a lot more serious than a roommate not doing the dishes. There are much more serious and harmful ways of being mistreated than inconsiderate roommates. So this is my reason number 2 for taking all this seriously, is why not learn early on? I guess I'm referring to young people with roommates, although pretty much applies at any age. Why not learn as soon as possible how to give the best treatment possible and to insist on it in return. You're listening to The Roommate Coach. My name is Mark Lynn. This is KZZH 96.7 FM in Eureka, California. This is episode 11 of The Roommate Coach, talking about good habits for being a great roommate, and that's part 2. You can leave feedback for me for The Roommate Coach at theroommatecoach.com using the feedback link, the contact link, on the homepage. You can also leave a voice message. There's a 24-hour voicemail system at 707-362-8000. 707-362-8000. The motto here at The Roommate Coach, that's my motto, is world peace, one roommate at a time. If we define the world as 7 billion and change, admittedly, one at a time is going to take a while. That's why I like to point out that you can have a much faster return on your efforts if you think in terms of your own world, which is where you live, you and your roommates. If there are 3 of you and you get one of the 3 to become more peaceful, that's a third of the world. That's a pretty neat accomplishment. Now, a third of the 7 billion, that'll take a little bit longer, so we'll just have to work on that one. Anyway, KZZH has been brought to the air by Access Humboldt. That's accesshumboldt.net. Okay, back to good habits for being a great roommate. Next one I'll talk about is competitiveness. Now, this is something that is certainly a major part of our culture, and we are encouraged to compete with each other from early on. And to an extent, it's a good thing. I'm not saying that all competitiveness is necessarily wrong. I just think that in some situations, it can be overdone and it can lead to problems between people, especially when it goes beyond just friendly competition and becomes somehow seen as crucial to one's well-being, that it just becomes super important to outdo or somehow be seen as better than the other. At some point, it becomes a problem. So what can you do about it? As far as the opposing or a recommended antidote, I guess you'd say, an alternative attitude, would be to keep in mind that if you're roommates, if you're sharing expenses, you are on the same team. You're not competing with each other. Your self-interest is shared. Whatever is good for your roommate and keeps them healthy and able to keep paying their share of the rent, that's good for you too. So keeping that in mind can certainly help. And like I said, it may not be possible to eliminate the competition entirely, and that may not even be necessary. It may just be a matter of turning it from the nervous or the, what would you say, just the unpleasant kind into more of a friendly competitiveness. That's all. That's just fine. And here's another thing you can try if it seems like the competition factor is causing trouble, getting in the way of your roommate relationship. Combination of just straight talk, just putting stuff out there and talking about it openly and honestly, combined with some goodwill and some humor, can sometimes go a long way, because it's the old elephant in the room. If it's perfectly obvious that you're competing with each other, but no one wants to talk about it, then it becomes kind of a nervous, anxiety-provoking type thing. So maybe you could just sit down and talk about it. Say, hey, I get the impression that you and I are kind of competing with each other to see who can, I don't know, lift the most weights or whatever. If there is even a specific area, there may not be. It may just be a general, who's the better person. But just put it out there as a topic for conversation and maybe make some laughs about it. Maybe you could put up some kind of a poster and keep little check marks to see who's winning. Just make it a real conscious type thing rather than some subterranean thing that doesn't get discussed but is there and kind of poisoning the relationship. My view is that we are encouraged from early in life to compete with each other, but we don't seem to get nearly as much explanation or encouragement or role models, for that matter, for how to cooperate with each other. I know I've gone to a fitness center here in town for a number of years, and I'm frequently kind of, I guess you'd say, chagrined when I notice sometimes the little kids as young as, seems like they're barely walking, and they're already being pretty much encouraged, I'm putting it politely, by their parents to outdo the other team. We've all heard the stories of the little league parents that go overboard, and some of the years gone by, there were some stories about some ice skaters who got into serious trouble, their parents, with taking the competition far too seriously. So I would advocate seriously considering lightening up on the competition, putting it in perspective, maybe adding a little humor to the mix if possible, and paying more attention to the fact that in many ways you really are on the same team. Well, that's going to be it today for episode 11 of The Roommate Coach, which is part 2 of Good Habits for Being a Great Roommate. I also included a little bit of an interlude about why roommates and roommate problems are so important. I'm the Roommate Coach. My name is Mark Lynn, and this is KZZH 96.7 FM in Eureka, California. KZZH has been brought to the air by Access Humboldt, accesshumboldt.net. The bumper music here on The Roommate Coach is called Rollin' at 5, and that's by Kevin MacLeod. You can leave feedback for The Roommate Coach in a couple of different ways, and if you do, please remember the episode number and or the name of the episode if you can. As I said, this is episode 11. It's part 2 of Good Habits for Great Roommates. But you can leave feedback at theroommatecoach.com using the contact link on the homepage, or you can leave a voice message 24/7 at area 707-362-8000. 707-362-8000. In the next edition, the next episode of The Roommate Coach, that'll be episode 12, I'll probably be wrapping up my comments and ideas about good habits for being a great roommate, which, by the way, ties back to my standard statement. It's almost a secondary motto that in order to have a good roommate or a great roommate, you have to be a great roommate. That's a pretty powerful statement right there, by the way, in that it points out something that is easily overlooked. The only part of a situation involving others that you have any direct control over is yourself. So that's what I like about that statement. Being a great roommate is something you can do. Waiting for someone else to become a better roommate, well, that's something you have no direct power over. But anyway, not to get back into the show, I'm closing things out here. I've enjoyed this session. I hope you have, and look forward to talking to you again real soon. Thanks a lot for listening.